I walked into my rental property and found my daughter-in-law directing movers. She was filming for Instagram, smiling at the camera. "Welcome to our new home," she said. She'd made a copy of my son's emergency key and moved in without asking. When I told them to leave, she stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "We're family," she said. "You own 3 houses. Surely you can let us use one." Then I called my lawyer. "Please drop your name and where you are watching from in the comments below, because subscribers sometimes appear as characters in my stories." Now, let me tell you what happened. I set the grocery bags down on the floor, very carefully, because my hands were starting to shake. "Heather," I said, and my voice came out quieter than I intended. "What is this? What's happening here?" She turned, and her face broke into that bright, confident smile I'd seen so many times before. The kind of smile that said she'd done nothing wrong, that I was the one being unreasonable. "Muriel, perfect timing," she said, gesturing around the room like she was showing me a surprise party. "What do you think? Should the couch go here or by the window? I need good lighting for my Instagram posts. This place has amazing natural light." I looked past her to the hallway where I could see Todd, my son, carrying another box. When he saw me, his face went pale, and he froze in place. "What is this?" I asked again, my voice steadier now. Heather laughed, that light musical laugh she used when she thought someone was being ridiculous. "We're moving in," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You had this place sitting empty, so figured we'd use it. Todd got the key that time you had him check on the property last month, and I made a copy. Pretty smart, right? We saved you the trouble of having to coordinate with us." Something cold settled in my chest, spreading through my ribs like ice water. Not anger yet. Something worse than anger. The realization that she genuinely believed this was acceptable, that she'd planned this, executed it, and expected me to smile and go along with it. "Did you check with the landlord?" I asked, and my voice was very calm now, very controlled. Heather tilted her head, confused, like I'd asked her something in a foreign language. "The landlord? You mean you?" "Come on, Muriel, we're family. You don't need to be so formal about this." "I am the landlord," I said quietly, and each word felt like I was placing stones on a scale. "And you don't have a lease. You don't have permission. And you don't have any right to be here." Her smile faltered, just slightly, a teeny crack in the confident mask. "Permission? We're family," she repeated, and her voice had an edge to it. "Todd is your son, your only child. You have 3 rental properties, 3 whole houses, just sitting there making you money. Surely you can let us use one. It's not like you need all of them. We're not asking for charity. Well, okay, we are, but it's family, so it's different." Behind her, Todd finally stepped into the room, still holding the box labeled "kitchen stuff" in Heather's looping handwriting. His eyes met mine for just a second before he looked away, and I saw everything I needed to know in that glance. He'd known this was wrong, and he'd done it anyway. "Mom?" he started, his voice uncertain and weak. "Heather said the place was empty, and we really need somewhere to stay right now. Our lease is up next week, and rent prices are insane. We can't afford anything decent. We thought, since you have the space, and it's just sitting here empty anyway." "This isn't empty," I interrupted, and my voice cut through the room like a knife. "I have a family coming to view it next Wednesday, the Wynn family. They're ready to sign a lease, $4,200 a month. That rent is my income, Todd. That's how I pay my bills and buy my groceries." Heather's expression shifted then, the friendly, casual mask slipping away to reveal something harder underneath. "Wait," she said slowly, and her voice was climbing now. "You're seriously going to rent this place to strangers? To people you don't even know? When your own son, your own flesh and blood, needs help? That's what you're choosing?" "Yes," I said simply, "because this is my business, and this is how I survive." "But you have 3 of these places," Heather shot back, and now her voice was rising to a near shout. "You have your pension from teaching. You're doing fine. You're comfortable. We're the ones struggling here. Todd makes decent money, but not enough for the kind of place we need. We have standards, Muriel. We can't just live anywhere. You're seriously going to charge your own son rent? She continued, not waiting for my answer. Your own child, who you're supposed to love and support? I charge everyone rent, I said, and my voice stayed level. That's how rental properties work, Heather. That's how this business functions. But we're family, she practically shouted, throwing her hands up. Families help each other. Families don't nickel and dime each other like strangers. Families respect each other's property, I replied, and my words were precise now, measured. And you broke into mine without asking permission. Broke in? Heather's eyes went wide with theatrical outrage. Todd had a key. How is that breaking in? He had a key for emergencies, I said, looking at my son now. For checking on the property when I'm away, not for moving in without my permission. This is an emergency, Heather insisted, stepping between me and Todd. We have nowhere to go. Our landlord wants us out by Friday. That's not my emergency, I said quietly. That's yours, and you should have planned better. And you definitely should have asked permission before moving into property that doesn't belong to you. I looked at my son then, really looked at him. He was 42 years old, standing there with a box in his arms, saying nothing while his wife bulldozed over every boundary I had. The same son I'd raised alone after his father died in a car accident when Todd was only 7 years old. The same son I'd worked 2 jobs to support, scraping together every dollar so he could go to college and have opportunities I never had. The same son who'd once promised me, with tears in his eyes at his father's funeral, that he'd take care of me when he grew up. And now here he was, unable or unwilling to tell his wife that breaking into someone's property, even your mother's property, was wrong. You need to leave, I said, and my voice didn't shake anymore. Call the movers back. Get your things out of here. I want everything out by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Heather stared at me like I'd slapped her across the face. You can't be serious, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. We already paid the movers $800. We signed a lease with our landlord saying we're out by Friday. We have nowhere to go, Muriel. Do you understand that? Then you should have asked me first, I said. And you definitely shouldn't have broken into my property and started moving in like you owned it. Heather turned to Todd, her face red now, her eyes blazing. Are you going to let her talk to us like this? She demanded. She's your mother. Tell her she's being unreasonable and ridiculous. Todd opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish gasping for air. Mom, he finally said, and his voice was weak and pleading. Can we just talk about this? Maybe work something out? Maybe we could stay for just a few weeks while we find something else. I should have felt something then. Some softness, some sympathy, some maternal instinct to protect and provide. But all I felt was a bone-deep weariness, heavy and cold in my chest. Because I'd been here before, not in this exact situation, but in versions of it scattered across 42 years. All the times I'd said yes when I wanted to say no, when every fiber of my being was screaming that I was being taken advantage of. All the times I put everyone else's needs before my own, because that's what good mothers were supposed to do. What good women did without complaint. All the times I disappeared a little more into the background of my own life, becoming smaller and quieter until I almost couldn't see myself anymore. And I was done with that version of myself. I'd spent 35 years building something from nothing, building a life that was mine. Working as a high school English teacher for 45 years, saving $500 every single month, even when I could barely afford it. Buying my first rental property in 1992 with $15,000 I'd scraped together, penny by penny. Then the second property, then the third, each one a stepping stone toward security and independence. 3 properties that generated $4,500 a month in rent, which combined with my pension of $2,800 gave me just enough to live on. Not lavishly, not even comfortably by most people's standards, but enough to breathe, enough to sleep at night without worrying about bills, enough to finally have something that was mine and mine alone. There's nothing to work out, I told Todd, and I picked up my grocery bags. Either you remove your belongings by tomorrow morning at 9, or I call the police and report a trespass. Heather made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a bitter laugh. The police? She said, her voice ripping with disbelief. You'd actually call the cops on your own son? On your own family? What kind of mother does that? The kind who won't let anyone, family or not, take what I've worked my entire life to build. I walked past both of them, heading for the door, my grocery bags heavy in my hands. 9 a.m., I repeated without looking back. If you're still here after that, I'm making the call. I didn't wait for a response, just walked out to my car and drove away. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. But I didn't cry. I didn't turn around. I didn't second-guess myself. I just drove home to my small apartment and locked the door behind me. That night, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Todd called 15 times in the first 2 hours alone. Heather called 23 times, and text messages piled up one after another until my phone was buzzing constantly like an angry wasp. I finally turned off all notifications and sat in the silence of my apartment. Except it wasn't really silent, because my mind was too loud for that, too full of doubts and second thoughts. Heather's messages were a mix of pleading and accusation, swinging wildly between the two extremes. Muriel, please reconsider, one message read. We have nowhere to go. Todd's salary isn't enough for a decent apartment in this city. What are we supposed to do, sleep on the street? Then, 20 minutes later, I can't believe you're choosing money over family. I guess I know where I stand now. I guess I know what really matters to you. Another message, this one longer. You know what? Maybe this is for the best. Maybe now Todd will finally see what kind of person you really are. Cold, selfish, more concerned about your precious properties than about your own son's welfare. Todd's messages were shorter, more desperate. Each one a little plea. Mom, please, just talk to us. Heather is really upset. She's crying. Can we work something out, even just for a few weeks? I'm begging you, Mom. I read them all. Every single one, letting each word sink in and settle. My chest felt tight, like someone was sitting on it, pressing down until I couldn't breathe properly. I wanted to respond, wanted to explain, wanted to make them understand. But I knew better. I'd learned this lesson the hard way over many years. Explaining yourself to someone who's determined to misunderstand you is like trying to fill a bucket with no bottom. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. Portland at night always looked peaceful from up here on the 14th floor. All those little windows glowing warm in the darkness. I wondered how many of those windows held people dealing with their own impossible situations. How many people were sitting right now wondering if they'd done the right thing, if they'd been too harsh or too soft. How many mothers were questioning whether love meant giving everything away until there was nothing left. The next morning, I called my lawyer before I even had my coffee. Richard Chen had been handling my real estate matters for 15 years, ever since I bought the second property. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and professional. Muriel, he said, and I could hear him smiling. What can I do for you this fine morning? I need to know my legal options, I told him, and then I explained the whole situation. The key Todd had for property management, Heather making a copy, the moving truck, the refusal to leave. Richard listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a brief pause while he considered. This is straightforward, he finally said, and his voice was calm and certain. What they did is illegal, Muriel, no question about it. The key your son had was for property management purposes only, not for personal use or occupancy. Making a copy of that key and using it to gain entry without your permission is criminal trespass under Oregon law. But they're family, I said, and I hated how weak my voice sounded. Doesn't that change things? Doesn't that matter? Doesn't matter even a little bit, Richard replied firmly. The law doesn't care about family relationships when it comes to property rights and criminal trespass. You're the owner. You're the landlord. You have a legal right to control who enters your property. And more importantly, you have a contractual obligation to your scheduled tenants. If you can't provide the Dwin family with the property as promised next Wednesday, you could be liable for breach of contract. My stomach clenched tight, a knot of anxiety forming. How much are we talking? I asked quietly. At minimum, any costs they incur finding alternative housing on short notice, Richard said. Could be $5,000, could be more, depending on circumstances. Plus, you'd lose the rental income for however long it takes to get your property back, and that's another few thousand. We're talking about serious money here. Money you can't afford to lose. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. What do I need to do? I asked. Send a formal notice to vacate, Richard said, and I could hear him typing already. 24 hours is standard for trespass situations in Oregon. If they don't comply within that time frame, you file a police report for criminal trespass and potentially pursue an eviction order. Though given that they never had a valid lease or rental agreement, it probably won't even come to that. I'll draft the notice right now and have it delivered by a process server this afternoon. That way there's legal documentation of delivery and they can't claim they never received it. Thank you, Richard, I said, and my voice was steadier now. You're doing the right thing, Muriel, he said gently. I know it doesn't feel good. I know it's hard when it's family. But you have to protect yourself and your livelihood. You can't let anyone take advantage of you. The notice arrived at 3 o'clock that afternoon, delivered by a process server to ensure proper legal documentation. A middle-aged woman in a gray suit, holding a clipboard and an official-looking envelope. I wasn't there, but I imagined the scene based on what happened next. Todd answering the door, still in his work clothes, probably confused. Are you Todd Fletcher? The woman would have asked. Yes, Todd would have said, uncertain. I have a legal notice for you. Sign here, please. Todd's hand shaking as he signed the delivery confirmation. The woman handing him the envelope and walking away without another word. The coldness of it, the finality, the official weight of the law coming down on him. Todd called me immediately, within 5 minutes of the process server leaving. Mom, he said, and I could hear that he'd been crying, his voice thick and broken. You sent legal papers? You actually sent legal papers to me? Yes, I said simply, and I forced myself to stay calm. Todd, you broke into my property without permission. You committed a crime. We didn't break in, he protested. But his voice was weak now. I had a key, Mom. How was that breaking in? That key wasn't yours to use for this purpose, I said. You had it for emergencies only, for checking on the property when I asked you to. Using it to move in without my permission is the same as breaking in, legally speaking. There was a long, painful silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, could hear the sound of Heather's voice in the background, sharp and angry. Heather's going to lose it when she sees this, Todd finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. She's already posting about you on Instagram, saying terrible things. Then she's giving me more evidence for my case, I replied, and the coldness in my own voice surprised me. I'm sorry it's come to this, Todd, but you left me no choice. I hung up before he could respond, before I could hear whatever he was going to say next. My hands were shaking, so I set the phone down on the table and walked away from it. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have, but I did anyway. I opened Instagram on my laptop and searched for Heather's account, her profile with its perfect filtered photos. Her latest post was from 2 hours ago, a photo of herself sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes, her face in her hands. The caption read, "Can't believe my mother-in-law is kicking us out. She owns 3 rental houses, but won't let family use even one. Guess money matters more than blood. more than helping your own son. There was a crying face emoji, then hashtag toxic family, hashtag heartbroken, hashtag family betrayal. The comments were already piling up, a mix of sympathy and skepticism. Some people were outraged on her behalf, their comments full of exclamation points and angry emojis. "That's awful," one person wrote. "Family should help family. That's what family is for." "I can't believe she'd do that to her own son," another comment said. But others were more skeptical, asking questions Heather wasn't answering. "Wait, it's her house though, right?" one person asked. "Did you ask permission before moving in? Or did you just assume?" Another comment. "There's probably more to this story than we're hearing." Heather had responded only to the supportive comments, giving them heart emojis and thank you messages. The questioning ones were ignored completely, left hanging without acknowledgement. I closed the app and stared at my blank laptop screen, seeing my own reflection in the dark glass. Part of me wanted to defend myself, to write my own post explaining the whole situation. But I knew better than that. I'd seen enough social media drama to know how it worked. Social media wasn't about truth, it was about narrative and presentation. And right now, Heather was painting herself as the victim and me as the villain. Any attempt I made to defend myself would just look like an old woman making excuses, trying to justify being cruel to her family. So I closed the laptop and went back to my tea, letting it all wash over me without responding. The next 24 hours crawled by like years, each hour stretching longer than the last. Todd left me one more voicemail, his voice flat and defeated, empty of emotion. "We're moving out," he said, the words coming out slow and heavy. "We found a short-term rental, a tiny studio apartment for $1,800 a month. It's barely big enough for both of us, but it's all we can afford right now." There was a long pause, and I heard him take a shaky breath. "But I want you to know this, Mom," he continued, and his voice got harder. "Heather's right about you. You chose money over family. You chose your rental income over your own son's well-being. And I don't know if I can forgive that. I don't know if I can forget this." The line went dead, and I sat with those words for a long time. Chose money over family, as if that's what this was about. As if the 35 years I'd spent building something, anything, so I wouldn't be a burden to anyone, didn't matter at all. As if the fact that my income depended on those properties was irrelevant, just details that didn't count. As if family meant having no boundaries, no rights, no life of my own outside of serving others. I thought about calling him back, explaining again, making him understand. But what would be the point when he was so determined to see me as the villain in this story? 3 days later, I met with the Wynn family as scheduled, right on time on Wednesday afternoon. They were lovely people, warm and kind, a young couple with 2 children who needed a stable home near good schools. An and Lynn Wynn, with their daughter Mai, who was 8, and their son Duke, who was 6. The children ran around the empty house, exclaiming over the big backyard, the bright windows, the space to play. "This is perfect," Lynn said, her eyes shining as she looked around the kitchen. "We've been looking for months." Everything was either too expensive or too far from the schools. We signed the lease right there at the kitchen table, their signatures neat and careful on the official document. They gave me first and last month's rent, plus security deposit, $4,400 in a cashier's check. They would move in that weekend, bringing their modest furniture and their children's toys and their hopes for a stable life. And for the first time in what felt like years, I breathed freely. My chest loosened, the tight band of anxiety finally releasing its grip. I'd done the right thing. I'd protected my livelihood and honored my commitments. But the silence between Todd and me stretched on, growing wider and deeper with each passing day. Days turned into weeks, and weeks began to turn into months. He didn't call, and I didn't call him. both of us locked in a stubborn standoff. Heather kept posting on social media, each post a variation on the same theme. My cold-hearted mother-in-law who cares more about money than family. My husband's toxic family who turned their backs on us when we needed help most. Week after week, the same narrative, the same victim story. Then something shifted, something I hadn't expected. Some of my former students, now adults in their 30s and 40s, started commenting on Heather's posts. Mrs. Fletcher bought school supplies out of her own pocket for students who couldn't afford them, one comment read. I remember because I was one of those students, and she never made me feel ashamed. Another comment appeared. Mrs. Fletcher is one of the most generous people I know. She spent 45 years teaching, helping kids who had nothing, giving from her own limited resources. She's not greedy, she's not selfish, she's smart, and she worked hard for what she has. More comments came, a steady stream of former students defending me. Mrs. Fletcher stayed late every single day to tutor students for free. Mrs. Fletcher drove students home when they missed the bus because their parents couldn't pick them up. Mrs. Fletcher paid for my college application fees when my family couldn't afford them. The tide in the comments started shifting, turning against Heather's narrative. People started asking harder questions, pointing out inconsistencies. So you moved into her property without asking, and you're mad she made you leave? Sounds like you're the one with boundary issues, not her. Heather deleted the posts one by one, but screenshots had already been taken and shared. The truth was getting out, despite her best efforts to control the story. 2 months after everything fell apart, Todd showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door and found him standing there alone, without Heather, looking terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed and wild, wearing clothes that looked like he'd slept in them. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly, and his voice was so small I barely heard him. I stepped aside without a word, and he walked past me into the living room. We sat across from each other, the coffee table between us like a demilitarized zone, a no-man's land neither of us knew how to cross. "I'm getting divorced," he said without preamble, just throwing the words out into the space between us. I stared at him, not sure I'd heard correctly, my mind struggling to process. "What?" I finally managed. "Heather and I are done," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. "After everything that happened with the house, after you made us leave, things got worse between us. She kept pushing me to sue you, kept saying we should take you to court. She said I should demand part of your properties since I'm your only child and I'd inherit them eventually anyway. She said we should force you to give us one of the houses now instead of waiting." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, couldn't process the level of entitlement. Todd ran his hands through his hair, gesture I remembered from when he was a child and had done something wrong. "I told her no," he continued, his voice getting stronger. "I told her that your properties are yours, that you earned them, that you worked your whole life for them. I said I had no right to them until you're gone, and even then, it's your choice what you do with them. And she said I had to choose between her and you, that I couldn't have both." Tears were streaming down his face now, leaving wet tracks on his unshaven cheeks. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking completely. "I chose wrong at first. I know I did. I chose her over you. But then I realized something important, something I should have seen all along. She didn't love me, not really. She loved what she thought you had. She loved the idea of free rent, of an easy life, of taking shortcuts instead of working for things. And I'd become just like her without even noticing. I'd started thinking the same way. I'd forgotten everything you taught me about working for what you want, about respecting other people's boundaries and property. I'd forgotten that you spent your whole life sacrificing for me so I could have opportunities you never had. And when you finally had something of your own, something you'd worked 35 years to build, I tried to take it from you like it was nothing." I got up from my chair and moved to sit beside him on the couch, the barrier finally broken. I put my hand on his shoulder, feeling him shake with sobs. "You didn't forget," I said quietly, choosing my words carefully. "You just got lost for a while. You let someone else's voice become louder than your own conscience. But you found your way back, and that's what matters now." He turned and hugged me then, wrapping his arms around me tight the way he used to when he was little. When he'd scraped his knee playing, or lost a friend at school, or was scared of the dark. Except now he was 42 years old and crying like his heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. I held him and cried too, my own tears finally coming after months of holding them back. For all the years of distance between us, for the pain we'd both caused and endured, for the new start we were somehow, impossibly, miraculously getting, despite everything. 6 months later, I helped Todd move into his own apartment. It was small, just 1 bedroom, nothing fancy or impressive, but it was his. Paid for with his own money, his own lease, his own responsibility and choices. We carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs together, working in comfortable silence. When we were done, sweating and tired, I made us coffee in his new kitchen. The kitchen was tiny, barely big enough for both of us to stand, but it was clean and bright. "You know," he said, looking around at this modest space with something like pride, "this feels better than any mansion would have felt, better than anything Heather was planning. Because it's mine. Because I earned it myself." I smiled and sipped my coffee. "Now you understand," I said simply. "Mom," he said after a moment, looking down at his cup, "when you die, eventually, a long time from now I hope, I'll inherit those properties, right?" "Eventually, yes," I said carefully, watching his face. "But that's hopefully a very long time from now, decades away. And until then, they're yours to down with, exactly as you wish," he said, meeting my eyes. I get that now. I really do. I understand it in a way I couldn't before. Those properties are your life's work, your security, your accomplishment. And I have no right to them until you decide otherwise, if you even decide otherwise at all. I reached across the small table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for understanding that," I said softly. A year passed after that conversation. A year of slow rebuilding. Todd and I had dinner every Sunday at my apartment, a routine we established and kept. He was doing well at work, getting promoted to senior developer with a significant raise. He started dating someone new, a woman named Sarah who understood the value of boundaries and mutual respect. Someone who had her own apartment, her own job, her own life that she'd built herself. My 3 properties kept generating income like they always had, steady and reliable. The Nguyen family renewed their lease for another year, and we became friendly in a professional way. Mai and Duke would wave to me when I came to check on the property, showing me their report cards. Everything settled into a peaceful rhythm, a calm that felt earned rather than fragile. On my 72nd birthday, Todd threw me a small party at my apartment. Just a few people, intimate and warm, former students and a couple of old teaching colleagues. Nothing fancy or elaborate, just cake and coffee and conversation. He gave a speech in my small living room that made everyone cry, including me. "My mother taught me the hardest lesson of my life this past year," he said, his voice steady. "She taught me that love and respect aren't opposites, aren't things you have to choose between. They're the same thing, 2 sides of the same coin. And she taught me that family doesn't mean you have unlimited access to someone's life or property. It means you respect their boundaries even more carefully, precisely because you love them." That night, after everyone left and the apartment was quiet again, I sat by my window with a cup of tea. The city lights spread out before me, Portland glowing softly in the darkness. My phone buzzed with a notification from my property management app. "Rent received from Property 3, Nguyen family," the message read. "Lease renewal option exercised for another year." I smiled and set the phone down on the windowsill. 35 years of work, 3 properties built penny by penny, One life I'd constructed, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, sacrifice by sacrifice. And nobody, not even family, not even love, could take it away from me now. Because I finally understood something I should have known all along. Something I wished I'd learned earlier. Setting boundaries isn't selfishness. It's survival. It's dignity. It's the way you teach the people you love that you're a person too, not just a resource to be used up. My daughter-in-law thought family meant free access to everything I'd built over decades of hard work. But I taught her and my son something different and more important. Family means respecting the life someone has built, not dismantling it for your own convenience. And now, looking out at the city lights one more time, I finally had what I'd been searching for. Not wealth or power or even security, though those things mattered. Just peace, simple and profound. The peace of knowing that my life is mine and I'm the one who decides what happens in it. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have let family move in without asking, hoping it would work out somehow? Or would you have protected what you built, even if it meant conflict and pain? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this one. Thank you for spending your time with me today. And remember that setting boundaries is an act of love.